7 o'clock. I will call the Whitebear Township Town Board meeting for February 19th, 2020 to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Patrick, I see we have a supplement.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to supplement consent item 5A with attorney comments, the renewal contract with our recording secretary has been resubmitted to you for your approval.
Other than that, no additions, no deletions?
No additions.
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And motion carries. Item number 3, approval of payment of bills. Did you?
I did move to approve payment of the bills.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Item number 4 is the approval of the minutes of February 3rd, 2020. Any changes?
I saw none. Move to approve the minutes of February 3rd meeting.
I will second that.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. Item number 5 is consent agenda. If the board has no reason to pull any of these off, I would look for a motion to approve.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Noting that the supplement replaces 5A. Says here.
I will move to approve the amended consent agenda with the supplement included.
I'll second that. I'll second that.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Item number 6 is old business. We have none. 7 is public hearings, which we have none. So we're going to move to item 8, new business, the Public Work Director item, which Dale isn't here. So Patrick or Jim, which one of you?
Do you want me to, Jim, or would you?
Go ahead and start it off. I'll take the next one.
Mr. Chair, submitted for the board's approval, the Public Works Director would like authorization to receive quotes and approve the Allied Blacktop company quote for this year. And street sweeping, I'm sorry.
So is this for, the quote, is that for the full year?
That is correct.
All right, so it'd be both spring and fall?
Yep.
Were these the same folks that we used last year?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yep. We have a track record with them. They're very efficient, and actually their quote is almost on par with what it was last year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Jim, got anything to add?
No, I mean, this is an item that the township does. It fulfills some of our requirements that we're required to do, and it is an improvement all around for the water quality and everything. So it's good to do it both in the spring and fall.
I got a couple questions. Is that cubic yards of waste, does that have a use? Isn't it just sand and dirt?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is one reason why we don't do these activities, the township themselves anymore, because these are not just simple material to dispose of. Tests get performed and there is limited use to it. So this way the contractor takes all the responsibility, because with all the salts and everything from the cars, we never know exactly what is in that material. In the past, you used to be able to use it for different areas around the township, but at this point, it basically becomes a possible liability in the future if you don't perform all the testing and deal with it appropriately. So it is something that the best interest of the township is to have it picked up and hauled away.
Okay, so does this go to landfills then?
I mean, it's up to the contractor. For the most part, they have their own disposal abilities. I mean, they're doing this throughout all the different areas. I'm not sure just where they end up putting it. That's for them to document.
Well, maybe it's a question for Chad then. Should we know where they're taking basically our road contaminations?
If it's considered hazardous waste, yeah, we should, because we're the generator of it.
Well, again,
When, Jim,
we're
is
not
it-
determining that it is hazardous waste. They are performing the tests and dealing with it appropriately.
But do
So
they-
we're not highlighting that this is something that has to be taken to a disposal
But do they
site.
ever give us the written document to say?
We end up getting the documentation from the contractor on how this is dealt with.
Is that done after every sweeping then, when they dispose of the material?
Yes, after, both in the spring and in the fall.
Well, so Chad, does that kind of?
That helps, I mean, but it'd be, Jim, I'm assuming you're obviously reviewing the report when it comes in to see what the contents are, and if there's anything we need to worry about.
Well, again, that's why we are not taking the responsibility of the material removal. They are signing a contract that they are appropriately, and they're documenting that they are doing it. So then,
Yeah,
That sounds
yeah,
good, but
I understand that, Jim, but the problem is, the township actually is generating this material. So and if it's, I mean, from what you're saying so far, it doesn't sound to be something I'd worry about too much, but I would like to at least know what the tests are telling us about the material.
yes, but when you made a statement about it being hazardous, and that is not a determination that is being made right now. So when you said, we want to know how this hazardous material is being dealt with,
Well,
it does not
okay.
mean that it's hazardous. We do
So
not
This
know.
material is being dealt with.
I didn't mean to imply that it's automatically hazardous, but nonetheless, we need to know what it is in case it is considered to be hazardous.
Correct, and that stuff is being documented.
On the
Yes.
Pearson proposal, it specifically says their pricing was provided the city, which is really the town, completes a profile with Vite. And if no profile is completed, a $350 material testing fee will apply. So their estimate implies that it's gonna be tested before they get rid of it, and one of them's included and one isn't included. Pearson they
Separate
price,
it or split it out.
yeah.
I assume Allied is testing it, right? Okay,
Correct,
so-
and
It doesn't say it,
with
but-
the options, we are not gonna perform the testing, we will have them do that.
All right, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Again, my only concern is that we have documentation, how it tested, and where it went.
Yes.
Okay.
We
That's
will have
fine.
that.
Yeah, I mean, and as long as nothing, serious shows up, or if we're fine.
Well, again, if the material contains anything in it that needs to be dealt with, it'll be appropriately dealt with through the contract. I just wanted to make sure that we are not assuming that we have hazardous conditions.
nobody's assuming
no,
it,
no,
but we
no,
want to
no,
know if there is something that's brought up, we want to know.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not assuming we have it, but nonetheless, we're still responsible for it, so we need to know where it's going and what it contains.
Correct. And that's covered through this is done every year. These contractors are covering themselves for all the testing and documentation of its disposal
sure.
sites.
So we're hauling it to the disposal site?
No, we don't
No,
haul it
we
either.
are not
It
touching
says city
that.
to provide trucking for hauling sweeping to the disposal site.
I think it's, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually, it's stored at the Public Works, and then the contractor then comes and picks it up themselves, right?
That's what his write-up says. But in the estimate, it says very clearly, city to provide trucking for hauling sweepings to disposal site.
But that's a temporary disposal site, right, Jim? And it's then picked up and goes to the permanent site.
As long as someone understands it, I guess, but.
If we want to make a motion with a clarification, or,
Well, we don't have any, per se, dump trucks to haul this stuff, do we?
no, we don't get involved with
If-
touching it.
if-
This is one of the reasons,
Yeah.
we've gone through this, even discussing the township purchasing a sweeper and
And
doing
that was
all
one of
this
my
stuff,
next
and
question, which is pretty much mute
we
now.
are-
Who did it last year? Which one?
I thought it was the same
It's
last
the
year.
same one that's got the bid in this year.
Okay.
Correct.
So was the contract the same, do you think? I mean, if it said last year, city to provide trucking for hauling, sweeping to disposal,
Yeah,
and
but-
we didn't do it last year,
It does go on to say that it's town to dump trucks and staff to haul sweepings back to Public Works yard. The sweeping would then be loaded into an end dump truck and hauled away by sweeping contractors. So ultimately, they're the ones that are disposing of it.
yes, but that's our write-up, that's not their contract, though. Chad.
Well,
For Pearson.
I'm just saying their contract isn't clear.
Pearson says that, Allied does not.
Allied says, city to provide trucking,
Where is that?
under the note. It says, under sweeping disposal, $35 per yard, note, sweeping to
Yep.
begin.
All right, I saw it
City
on
to provide
this
trucking.
one. So do we want to,
Well, if it's the same,
Well, then to your point, we need to clarify what they mean by disposal site. Because if the disposal site is the actual end site, then yeah, you're right. If we follow what the explanation is, then we're not hauling it to the end site, we're simply hauling it to a temporary transit site. So that's me to clarify that. That's a good point.
And either way you want to do it, at this point, we are in February.
well, I'd like to get it ready to go.
We can table this and or have specific direction of clarification.
Just ask the contractor to clarify that part of it.
Or modify their contract to state that, so.
Yeah, add an addendum to the contract, simply saying, here, let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Contingent upon that.
If that is
Yeah.
the clear understanding between you and Dale and these people, that they're gonna haul it away, and we're only taking it to a temporary site, I'm golden. If it turns out that that isn't, then
And that's maybe what they mean, is this disposal site is a temporary site, but it's pretty non-descriptive.
Sure.
yeah, and it's city to provide the trucking. Well,
Yeah, we're not in that business.
we're not in that business.
Well, like I said, I know we've talked about purchasing sweepers before, but I didn't realize getting into that end of it, I don't think we want to be involved.
Correct.
I mean, if it made sense economic-wise, what we paid someone else to do this, if we could purchase the equipment and do it cheaper, but not if we got to deal with all that hauling and worried about testing and where it's going.
So I guess if, Chad, if, either way, if we want to put clarifications on this, or what would you recommend?
A simple addendum, and I can just send it down to you tomorrow, Jim. You know, just basic, so it's consistent with what we say, what it says in the reference and background. You know, that basically the town dump trucks and staff haul the sweepings back to the public works yard, and the sweepings would then be loaded into an end dump truck and hauled away by the contractor for disposal. I mean, yeah, it's that simple. I have it down to you tomorrow morning. Well, except for one problem. When I left the office, the computers were down. So if the computers are up, you'll have it by 9:30.
Well, can we go ahead and
Contingent
approve this
upon.
contingent upon
Subject to,
clarification
yes,
of-
subject to, yeah.
and subject to the computers being operational?
So I'll move based on the
Doesn't
Public
matter.
Work Director's review and recommendation, receive the quotes from Allied Blacktop Company and Pearson Brothers.
I'll second that.
Motion's made, second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, and the second one is,
I'll move based on Public Work Director review and recommendation, approve the proposal from Allied Blacktopping for $87 per hour per sweeper and disposal fee of $35 per cubic yard for a total of $21,969, pending the addendum to clarify the dump site as temporary at the township or other disposal.
Noting funding from the
Oh, yeah, noting funding from the Stormwater Utility Fund.
I'll second that.
motion's made, second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You thought that was gonna be an easy one, didn't you?
Yeah, no kidding, gosh.
I did too.
We're just getting started.
That's why I volunteered to carry it for him.
That'll teach you.
Yeah, right? Dale has to come to every meeting now.
No kidding.
All right, moving on, item 8B, our wellhead protection.
Wow.
Mr. Chair,
Looks like this could be an easy one, huh?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, every 10 years, the township is required to update its wellhead protection plan, and that's what we'll be doing here at this point. The township, Dale Reed in our office, has already met with members of the Department of Health to do a scoping of this activity. Basically, there is a two-part process. Part one is what we're looking at for 2020 for the work to be done, and then there will be a subsequent project that will be done in 2021. All of this work has to be done by the end of 2021. The Department of Health was very pleased that the township already is getting involved with this. It does take some time under the first component in this part one. It'll be dealing with the subground water flows. We'll get into the wellhead protections, the areas that fall into those zones. We'll be reviewing all the documentation that has been done through the White Bear Lake investigation of how the water flows and all that. So there's a lot of this. You get into how your emergency plans have been set up, and if there's ever the contaminations, what is your vulnerability area. All this is already in place, but every 10 years the data is improved upon. It is brought up to date. Anything dealing with what has transpired over those 10 years will be added into this document. A lot of it, the township has been accumulating over the last 10 years, so it'll be compiling that data. And actually, Dale Reed has already been putting together, through this process, we'll be notifying all the adjacent communities, as which they will also be going through the same process and notifying us, because with all the water movements, it's not restricted by community boundaries. So everybody gets a chance to look at everybody else's wellhead protection plan. As part of this, TKDA will work with a sub-consultant at WSP USA. They actually do the subground water modeling, and as I stated, there's a lot of documentation out there that's been occurring over the last 10 years. We'll compile that information, and we'll work with the township staff to put that together. A lot of it through our comp plan. We've already been generating how things are used and what the consumptions are through the annual reports that we do. So a lot of this will be compiling, but for the most part, part one is gathering all this documentation, doing the analysis, and then that'll be one report that the Department of Health will review, and then we'll do an actual scoping process for part two that'll take place next year, 2021. So what we're asking for tonight is an authorization in a total amount of $23,100, and that is a not to exceed, to perform part one improvements, and we'll work with the township and the sub-consultant to put that together. We will hold more meetings with the Department of Health, walking through this process. We'll bring that back to the board this late summer, and it'll be another document that will come to the board to be presented to the Minnesota Department of Health, and then we'll follow up next year with part two of that process. So it's a lot of interaction with the Minnesota Department of Health, but we are off to a very good start, and by getting going on this now gives us time to do part one by the end of the year.
Could you elaborate a little bit on this WSP USA? What is this? I don't remember ever seeing this company.
So they are, there's pretty much two firms that do the work around this area. Some of their staff move back and forth. They have a small office here. They have done work, and TKDA and the staff has done work in the township 10 years ago, going through this process. So we're very familiar with them. And
Well, is this all they do?
for the most part, yes. I mean, everything is the analysis process of the water movements. I mean, that's one of their components of their
It's just with
firm.
all the stuff going on with groundwater and the White Bear Lake, I just don't remember seeing this group. What, do you know what WSP stands for?
I don't recall.
It just kind of stuck out because we've been dealing with this water issue
Oh.
forever, and it's like, I just don't remember seeing this group.
So they have been involved in the past with the township and with our office, so I haven't worked with them lately, but this process we only do every 10 years.
Was part of the reason for wellhead protection so somebody can't screw around with our water, so they can't get to the wells and contaminate them?
So both of it, kind of twofold, is first we got to understand what our vulnerabilities are and understand how we have to protect things. This gets into also what can you do within these vulnerability areas, and then also how are you protecting yourself from something occurring, and if something does occur, what are your measures and steps that you'll enact if something does happen. So there's 10 years ago, there was a emergency response plan that the township and all the communities had to go through. You did all the work, and then you had to, tuck that plan away and remove all documentation so that nothing could get into the wrong hands. There's a lot of precautions so that somebody doesn't obtain the information that comes out of all these things and able to use it in a negative manner.
Is this just for the township wells, or does it also take into account private wells that residents may have?
It covers all wells. There's limits of just what the impacts or restrictions are when you get into the private wells, just as in everything that we deal with. It's a much lower threshold because of such a small service area and contributing area to those private wells.
Well, even
but
if
they
that's-
are
They're
still
so
part
shallow
of it.
compared to our deep
But
wells.
I have a private well, I still have a lock on the cap, just so the kids can't play around and throw something down.
Correct. So, I mean, clearly the main thing is a large distribution system is what it's going after, to make sure we understand what the vulnerabilities are, how to protect those, and what to do if something does happen.
All right, any other questions of Jim? Come on, we can stump him. Think of something.
Well, okay, so this is the first step, and you'll come back sometime this summer to say, here's what we've done so far.
Correct.
Will there be additional expenses at that point prior to year end? Or is it going to be more that when we start the second phase in 2021, that there'll be some new authorizations needed for certain activities that we'll have to make sure are included?
Sure. At this point, this is going to cover us for 2020. It's doing all the preparation, all the information gathering and documenting that. There will be a scoping following the completion of Part 1 with the Department of Health that will come to you with a 2021 authorization. But at this point, this will cover everything we're doing this year.
So this is, part one really ends up being an approval process, but they have to agree to what your plan is, or not?
Correct. I mean, they've already met with us and have given us a specific scoping. All the communities, in general, you have the same scoping items, but based on the individual communities, there are specific additions or eliminations of some of the components that's already been determined for the township.
Alrighty.
All right, anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, based on the town engineer review and recommendation, I'd make a motion to authorize TKDA complete Park 1 amendment for a total not to exceed $23,100, which includes $7,900 for TKDA and $15,200 for the subconsultant WSP USA to complete the required groundwater modeling work by the end of 2020, noting funding from the water fund.
I will second that.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that motion carries. That is pretty much our agenda. Number 9, we don't have any. Number 10, we have open time. I see if we have some guests. If you'd like to just come up and introduce yourself at the podium, your name and address.
Okay, Sherry Hastings, 4373 Fisher Lane in White Bear Township. So talking about the wellhead protection, I wasn't really familiar with what that was, so I looked at MPCA's website, and it says the purpose of the wellhead protection program is to prevent contamination of public drinking water supplies by identifying water supply recharge areas and implementing management practices for potential pollution sources found within those areas. And it goes on and talks about how some of the water can be contaminated by various sources, including petroleum and other things. So of course, I'm concerned on behalf of the Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group representing the citizens in the White Bear area, with understanding all the pollution that's been happening on the Water Gremlin site and the wetlands, and their concern of 1,4-dioxane getting close. It's in the surface water, and lead's in the surface water. And I don't know if you've been familiar with the recent reports, but we've been inviting you folks to come to the meetings, and I know one of your teammates has been coming. So there are contaminations on the Water Gremlin site that's going into the groundwater, and I know that the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency are looking at those closer and doing additional testing. And I will talk to the Minnesota Department of Health about how this plan that you have, what concerns me is that it hasn't been done for 10 years, and that's probably the normal practice. I'm not, disputing that, but do we want to expedite it more? So I know you got phase 1 underway, and then phase 2 would be, a time later. So I guess what I'm going to do on behalf of the Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group and the citizens of the White Bear area is talk to our state agencies and see, based on the contamination that they found on the Water Gremlin site and in the surface waters and in the ground soil, and the fact that that property sits on the wetlands, would that warrant us to take a closer look sooner or to do any further testing?
Jim, how far down does our wells go?
We're roughly in the 300-foot range.
I know one thing that the White Bear, or the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency are doing is they're going to test the wells again, because they tested them once and they were clear, the residential wells and the White Bear Township wells. But now that they found 1,4-dioxane, which is really hard to, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but they found that that's harder to get out of the water supply system. So they're concerned, and they just want to double and recheck the wells to make sure that that's not getting in the drinking wells of, folks that are in Gem Lake and other areas that still have wells. But I'm just trying to understand if you understand how the wellhead protection phase 1 study goes and phase 2, how that might impact with this new information that we are made aware of. And I'd be glad to provide, I know that your partner is in our meetings. I don't know if he received all of the environmental testing and mapping, but that's going to be released soon, this new set of studies that was done by, through Water Gremlins. It's not Braun Intertech, but it's, I'm drawing a blank which company it is. I don't know if you remember which testing company.
I really couldn't tell you for sure.
Wink Environment. So they've released their testing reports, and it's going to be put on the Minnesota Pollution Control's website in probably the next week.
Well,
or
I've
so.
signed up for that. So if it's on the website, I'll get
And
it.
I do have a draft version of it I'd be glad to provide to you, but I'm just wondering if you're aware of how that plays into this. I know it's a broader perspective. You're looking at all facets.
Well,
but-
Sherry, I was just at a Velamo Tech meeting last Friday morning,
Yeah,
and the
okay.
MPCA was there.
Yeah.
Mike and Tim Gray, I guess I don't remember their names offhand. And they had a fairly extensive PowerPoint presentation that I'll be sharing with the other board members here.
Great.
And it does kind of cover all the spots where they found contaminations, but never once did I hear them say that our groundwater was contaminated. It was just ground soil.
Surface water, I'm sorry, I should say surface water.
Right.
And then there's lead in the surface water, there's 1,4-dioxane in the surface water, and I can give you all these reports that they're finding.
And I got that from his report,
Yep,
too.
and it's
so.
going south towards Lambert Creek, which could be concerning, because then that can get into other sources of
Right.
water. If it gets there, I'm not saying it's there, I'm
Well,
just
he
saying
did-
that it's in the, so 1,4-dioxane sinks further, can sink further, and once it gets into the water supply, can be concerning. Plus, you have TCE, TCA, there's a lot of other things that they're finding in the surface and ground.
Well, they did say, the MPCA did say that this year they are going to test a couple of spots west of Otter Lake Road in the Lamprey Creek area.
They are.
Because they did find a couple spots right next to the road, so they want to jump over and test there.
So they did tell me they're gonna jump over the road of Otter Lake Road, and then they're going south, and they'll continue to explore, because it's kind of like a smiley face is how they defined it, and that's what the mapping looks like. So it's heading towards Lambert Creek. I'm not saying it's in Lambert Creek, they don't know for sure, that's why they're doing more testing. But now that you brought up the wellhead protection, maybe you might want to share those, I'm asking you to share those reports with them, so as they're looking at all of this, they have that information. In the
Absolutely.
Minnesota Department of Health, I'll make them aware of that too.
And we're very involved in this, trust us, we're very involved. And that was a very informative meeting. There was a lot of information that he just dumped on us that you have to be a geologist to understand most of it. But as of now, they're still going to continue the ground monitoring. They didn't really give a time frame. They just, as it keeps coming, they're just going to keep testing, so.
Yeah, we're involved in, every other Friday, we're in a meeting involved with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnesota Department of Health, and they share these maps, and you all can come at any time and get better acquainted and ask as many questions as you like.
Okay.
But I know that your attorney has been coming now, so their team. So my question is, could you please share those maps and the tests that, and especially the newest report that's going to be out with your vendor, TKDA. I've used them in the past. They're a great vendor, and they'll be very well aware. They'll be able to understand.
Well, so Jim, you're hearing this loud and clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, members of the board, there's a lot of stuff going on every year that the township is involved in. And this, again, is a document that comes every 10 years. And the township is out in front already. This has just come out. We've already met with the Department of Health, and it's just February, and you are already authorizing the work to get underway. So the township is doing very well.
I'm not complaining that the township's, and I'm not saying the
Oh, no,
township's
no.
not doing well. I'm saying if you would take into consideration these latest tests, and I'll talk to the Minnesota Department of Health and also the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to see if we need to expedite that.
I think we understand, yeah. We'll stay in touch with those agencies and make sure that they are keeping us aware of what tests we should be doing to our water.
Right. That's great. I have one more thing, but I can't remember now. So, you got anything, Phil?
It's still young.
All right, thanks, Sherry.
Thanks.
All right, moving on. Item 11, I need a motion to receive agenda materials and supplements.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned at 7:34.
Thanks, folks.